All right, good afternoon and welcome to our Wednesday webinar series, Meet the Colleges, Conversations with Florida Regional Admissions Counselors, also known as FRAC. My name is Kathy Hart. I am an educational consultant with SCORE at the Top, Learning Centers and Schools, and I am your moderator for this series. I believe we should have a few handouts, nothing for this particular session, but we usually have some SCORE at the Top information. So if you wish to access those, if you go to the GoToWebinar control panel and then click on the plus next to the handouts, and then you should be able to see any of the handouts that we've placed there. And then you can click on those and enjoy. And we're also going to be sending out, when we send out the link to this recording later on, a form if you'd like to get in touch with any members of FRAC or have them reach out to you, an inquiry form. We'll also include that as well too. And of course, if you encounter any audio difficulties throughout this presentation, you can always try calling in. Click on the plus next to the audio and then follow the directions. And we will, of course, send a link to this recording. And also all of our webinars are always available for your convenience 24/7 at scorewebinars.com. All right, so let's go ahead and get started with tonight's conversation. And if you haven't seen our previous two conversations with FRAC, I highly recommend going back and viewing them. Our first session from 2 weeks ago, we got to meet 16 members of FRAC. They each gave some information about their schools and admission requirements and some of the deadlines and information about scholarships. Last week, we had 6 members here for a great presentation on college case studies. And tonight, we're welcoming 5 members for a further in-depth conversation on what makes strong applications, so continuing our discussion from last week. So if you're unfamiliar with who FRAC is, who they are Florida Regional Admissions Counselors. They are based in Florida, but they represent out-of-state schools, and they serve as a resource for our Florida high school students and counselors who are interested in higher educational opportunities outside of the state. So a wonderful, wonderful organization. They've been very generous with their time and information with us through this series. And if you'd like to get to know them further, there are over 20 member schools, and you can find the complete list, including the names of the representatives and contact information on their website, wearefrac.org. All right, I'm going to introduce the presenters for this evening, and then we'll get started with our conversation. So Jeff Fusco is the Southeast Regional Admissions Counselor for George Mason University. Originally from Western Massachusetts, Jeff chose to attend Mason as an out-of-state student and graduated in 2013 with his Bachelor's of Arts in Interpersonal and Organizational Communication. He then relocated to Tampa, Florida, where he earned his master's degree in higher education and student affairs from the University of South Florida in 2015. During his graduate studies, he conducted research on out-of-state student success and retention programs. Over the past 7 years, Jeff's higher education career has brought him to USF, the University of Mississippi, Ole Miss, and Florida Atlantic University before returning to Mason a little over 2 years ago. He's based in Tampa, Florida. Next, we have Richard Ofterheide, is a Michigan State University, MSU, admissions counselor, regionally based in St. Pete, Florida. He serves both high school and transfer students from the state of Florida as they navigate the college application process. Richard is a double alumnus of MSU with a BA in Social Sciences, Secondary Education, 2009, and an MA in Student Affairs Administration, 2012. He has worked in several functional areas of higher education, including admissions, orientation, student activities, and residence life. This is Richard's 7th year as an admissions counselor for MSU. Next, we have Marlon Meikle. is a South Florida-based arts educator, administrator, performance artist, first-generation immigrant and college student who's very interested in demystifying the college admissions. In addition to his professional creative work, Marlon has worked in admission at university-level programs, including his alma mater, South Methodist University's Meadows School of the Arts, NYU Tisch School of the Arts, the New York Conservatory for Dramatic Arts, and the New School in New York City, where he was instrumental in launching their newest Bachelor of Fine Arts in Theater program and served as Assistant Director for Academic Affairs for the School of Drama. Marlon is now the Assistant Director of Admission for Parsons School of Design at the New School, focusing on the Southeast and San Diego. Dan Johnston has been working in college admissions for almost 10 years. He started the Regional Recruiter Program at his previous institution and is now the Regional Admission Counselor for Olin College of Engineering. His territory includes Texas to North Carolina. He is a native South Floridian and loves FAU football and the Miami Heat. And then finally, we have Olander Fleming, is entering his 5th year, 11th overall in admissions as a Southeast Regional Coordinator at the University of Maryland, College Park. He oversees recruitment activities in the states of Florida and Georgia and is based in Port St. Lucie. Before working at UMD, he was the Assistant Director of Emerging Populations at Longwood University, where he managed recruitment in Northern Virginia, Latin America, and out-of-state markets in the Northeast. All right, and then we're going to start off our 3rd session, and we're going to continue the conversation that we started last week when we were looking at college case studies and talking about the various factors that go into the college admissions process. And I'm just going to pull up one slide and then we'll get started. And so this is going to be a roundtable conversation in which our admissions counselors are going to share information for our students and their families, both for our rising seniors and perhaps even students, younger students who might be interested in learning more about the college application process and finding out, how can I strengthen these various areas of the college application? So let me go ahead and make sure I can see my panel. Yes, I can. Perfect. All right. All right. So I guess the first question that I wanted to get started with and kick off this conversation with is, of course, one thing that students find out right away, and their parents too, is applying to colleges is more than just writing your name and address and then sending things out in the world. That it's a relatively, I think, complicated, or not complicated, but complex process, and there's a lot of different factors that go into admissions. And so what I wanted to begin with is academics. And just thinking about, and just turning it over to you and talking about how important, of course, are academics as far as the overall application. And also if we could talk about this word rigor that pops up a lot in these discussions on academics. So maybe I'll start in the order that I can view you. So Jeff from Mason, if you wanted to get started with this.
Yeah, so rigor, and I'm sure you're going to get a different answer from all 5 of us, because I think the way that your university interprets it is probably going to be different. But the way that we look at rigor with George Mason and the way we advise students is what we want to see is over the course of your 4 years, if you started to perform well in certain subjects, we want to see that you made the choice to challenge yourself further, right? So maybe freshman year you took regular English and you got, a really high grade, A plus, 98 or above. We want to see that you've made the decision to challenge yourself and take that a step further and maybe try honors your sophomore year, right? If that goes well, AP in the future. I think that's probably the easiest way that I can break it down is we do look at what does time tell us, right? Like what kind of arc can we see from a student's transcript? And so we're not expecting students to come in and do, full honors course load their freshman year. Do what you think is in your capability to do if you think you can challenge yourself a little more in an additional area. Because the last thing that we want to see, and we see it all the time, is that, students do, pretty okay. And then 1 year with almost no honors or AP courses, any of those additional challenging courses, and then they overload themselves junior year, and you can see that it has an impact on their overall GPA because, it's that tough challenge of trying to balance everything at once. And so, what I tell folks is to only bite off what you can chew, and make sure that you can do it excellently.
Good, thank you. Richard?
Yeah, I think Jeff kind of nailed it there. The key word is challenge, and you really have to challenge yourself within the curriculum that your school offers. So we don't expect you to do things that you don't have access to. So we're going to be comparing you as an applicant compared to other students from your school or similar schools that you go to that have similar opportunities. Not all high schools are created equal, and we understand that. That's our job as admissions counselors, to really understand what your high school has to offer in terms of a curriculum, honors curriculum, AP or IB, those types of offerings and opportunities. So it really is about figuring out, what it is you're trying to get out of high school. Maybe if you already have an idea of what type of career path you're planning on going into, like if you know for sure already you want to go into engineering, you really should be focusing on as many high-level math and science courses as you can while you're in high school, so that way you're best prepared once you get to college. So rigor really is going to be different for each of you, and for every college that's reviewing you. So it's best to just really kind of do that critical thinking and self-reflection for what's best for you, and challenge yourself within the offerings that your school has.
Thank you. Olander, please.
Yeah, we admissions counselors, we have an interesting task where we have to take your information, everything you provide us, to be able to predict how successful you will be during your time at our institutions. And we want you to be successful. So by looking at the courses you're selecting, the rigor of it, it helps us sort of paint the picture. Now, we're not going to be correct 100% of the time, but it gives us a better idea if we see that upward trend and the grades, at least as you increase your rigor, the grades either stay the same as far as an A, B average, or they improve from maybe a C, B average to more of an A average over time. We'd rather see that with your rigor than for you to jump in the rigor and go downward with the grade. So maybe your freshman year was the excellent year, but then by the time you hit your junior year, you're more of a C and hopefully no D average. That's what we don't want to see right there. A perfect example, a few years back, I remember reviewing a student that she believed that a full IB course load is what we wanted to see. Unfortunately, her grades in those courses were C's and D's by the time she hit her junior year. And while her test scores and everything else was everything we would like to see in an applicant, the grades are more of an indicator for what she'll be doing on our campus, and we did not have a positive decision for her. So even though it might sound great, let's go ahead and go for all of it. You have to think about yourself. Don't think about your peers and trying to compare who got in the previous year. Think about yourself and what your capabilities are, and maximize your efforts in those areas.
Thank you. And Marlon?
Yeah, absolutely. I absolutely agree with my colleagues on this, especially when it comes to the resources that you have available to you at your particular high school. We want to see that you are able to take advantage of what is presented to you, not necessarily, compare what those possibilities are compared to another student in another region with other resources. I would like to also sort of just mention that academic rigor for us is breadth as well as depth. And so, yes, when you're thinking about, those upper level classes, IB and AP and that sort of thing, that's meaningful to us. But we also, I think, value academic exploration, a lot of the universities that are here. And so if you're not necessarily a person who's going to be successful in an upper level IB, AP curriculum, I think that if you are looking at your curriculum and saying, hey, I haven't explored history in this kind of way before, I haven't explored art making in this kind of way, or math in this kind of way, and we can see that in your transcripts, I think that is also a really strong indicator if you're not necessarily the student who's going to be the best AP student.
Oh, good. Thank you. And Dan, please.
Yeah, I'm not sure what more I can add, because I think they really handled, or really gave out a lot of great information. Again, I'd like to echo the statement of challenging yourself, but not kind of overloading yourself. And again, that all of what we're looking for individually is going to change from institution to institution. Whereas my institution, where we prefer to see the most challenging, and rigorous schedule available. Also, yes, that may be true, but I am also looking at a student who, if I see that they are struggling in more challenging classes consistently, then that can negatively impact them as well. So, I mean, really, it's about certainly it's about challenging yourself. I think all of us here would agree that we want to see you challenge yourself with that academic rigor, but also just to not overload yourself and have a negative impact.
Good, good. Oh, thank you. Thank you all. Yeah, so what I'm hearing and a question we get asked a lot is, is that classic, is it better to get an A in an honors course or get a B or a C in an AP IB? And it sounds like that it's do what's whereas in the case of Orlando, Orlando, what you said is, making sure that the grades stay consistent and you're taking the appropriate level of challenge for you. Oh, and actually, we got a couple questions that have popped up in the chat box, so I'm gonna ask them because and for our audience, if you have any questions as we go along, please do ask them. I'm gonna be keeping an eye out. This is a conversation for you, so we're happy to answer your questions. And from one of our attendees was asking about they were in honors in grades 9 through 11, but was only able to get into an honors seminar in 12th grade. And how does this viewed? It sounds like it might have been like something where they had a limited choice or selection. And how would you look at this, answer this question, or kind of help the student kind of look at this question? Anyone want to try?
So I'll take it. I mean,
yeah.
Well,
I think Jeff and I both at the same time. So anybody? Okay, I'll do it then. No, for that class or for that situation, usually we'll find out in other parts of your application that circumstance if you're just sharing or not sharing any information at all. And so there's no council letter of recommendation, or you don't take advantage of one of the application systems, one of the sections that says any additional information you would like to explain. Yes, we will assume that you decided to take an easier senior year than what your previous 3 years have shown. But most of the time, through one of your recommendations or through that explanation category, you'll be able to fill out and share the information with us. We're not going to hold it against you that might be the only opportunity that you had. It's different if you make the effort to not have any honors or any rigorous courses and it's intentional and we find that out versus the inability to do so because of scheduling.
Scheduling. Good. No, thank you. Let's see. And then we've got another question. So asking, oh, and actually this is a great question. I had this appearing on my list from an earlier question, is asking actually about foreign languages and the foreign language requirement. And this student wants to know if you have to take honors or AP foreign language, if that's not something that you find your thing, or are you okay if rigor is just in the 4 core classes, which I believe they mean your English, social studies, science, and math. What about foreign languages? I think this is an excellent question, and looking at the rigor there or the level.
I mean, I would say that I just want to see that you have excelled in areas that you're passionate about, right? So even if it's outside of the 4 core classes, or I think a foreign language would count for this, right? If you are someone, at Mason, we have a lot of folks who want to go into global relations, international affairs, things like that. And so when I see those applications come through, I'm instantly looking at their foreign language courses on the transcript, because I know that that is a requirement of that particular degree program. And so I would say that it's going to probably vary institution to institution, especially on the foreign language piece. For us, it is a soft requirement. We look for it, but it's not necessarily required unless you are enrolling in a Bachelor of Arts degree that's going to require it.
Require it. Good. Yeah. Anyone else thoughts on foreign language? Anyone?
I'll add one thing is it's important to consider how competitive the school is that you're applying to, because at some institutions, just having 2 years of foreign language, whatever it may be, might be enough. But when you add in the kind of that rigor piece to foreign language, the amount or the number of years that you've taken that foreign language, as well as the foreign language itself. So if you are taking Mandarin or Japanese or over, I mean, especially here in South Florida, over, French or Spanish, and you've only taken 2 years of that, if you think that you're going to be applying to a more rigorous institution, those more rigorous institutions, as they get more rigorous, they start to look at things more and more in a deeper level. So foreign language can be one of those things, to where if you are taking 3 or 4 years of a different language, a not usual language, like for instance, French or Spanish, that's something that can also positively impact your application, because it's another way for you to stand out.
Also, I would just add that it's important to note that, a lot of schools will list that they want to, they'd like to see at least 2 years of the same foreign language. And like Mason, that's a soft requirement for us as well. What I will say is, if you don't have that language requirement, or if your school doesn't offer the language, that's fine. That's not going to deter you from being admitted. But we would like to see that you replace those 2 years of language with other core classes. So we want to see that you're still keeping up that rigor and the higher level curriculum, even if you can't take those language classes.
No, good. No, thank you very much. And another question that will come up, and especially for our Florida students, is because many Florida students, in addition to taking IB or AP courses, also many students will take ACE classes or dual enrollment courses. And for out-of-state schools, how do you evaluate those courses? Are they considered the same level as AP and IB? And can students get college credit for those courses, the ACE and the dual enrollment?
I think you're going to get a very different answer for this from everybody. A lot of schools, if it's a college level class and it shows up on a college transcript and it's a course that their university offers, you will get credit for it. A lot of times the grade that you get in that class does not follow you, and you have to get a certain grade, or usually it's a C or above. C minuses or below don't transfer to other universities typically. So it really depends on the university. Some schools it'll come in as like an elective credit. For my university, taking dual enrollment, we considered that when we're looking at your transcript as if you're taking a high school class. It is challenging, but we can't look at it the same way we would an AP or an IB course, because you don't have that examination at the end of the year. So we don't actually increase your GPA. We have a boost in our GPA recalculation for AP and IB courses, but not for dual enrollment. But you can I've seen students come in with up to 60 credits of dual enrollment that transfer to our university.
So good. Yeah, no, anyone else want to discuss that?
I would say on the opposite end, we do recognize dual enrollment and ACE as the same thing as AP or IB coursework. And so, I think that's just a good example of, if you are interested in the university, you're going to be bringing in, that Cambridge or ACE or dual enrollment credit, is making sure you're talking to the counselor, because it's going to be a variation. So for us, it counts the same as AP or IB.
And ditto to what Jeff said, at least for the University of Maryland as well. One thing I always say, even if you do have an institution that doesn't provide credit for one of those rigorous courses, don't feel bad about it, because you have the upper advantage. You already have a year's worth of information related to that course you'll probably have to take over the 4 years at your future institution, and it gives you the upper hand while you're taking the course on the college campus. So hopefully you'll have a much better grade for a class that you'll be paying for, and that's one thing to think about if things don't quite work out when you're talking about grades converting over to your degree at your institution.
Useful too, just to jump in really quick, a lot of colleges and universities have transfer equivalency pages where you can actually go in, and it's a database where you can say, I'm taking a class at, Miami-Dade or whatever community college or whatever university, and you put in the course and the number, and it'll tell you if they have accepted that course in the past at their university and what course it will count for at that university.
Great. Marlon or Dan, any other thoughts on the AP or, the ACE or dual enrollment classes?
Yeah, I think that, is specifically from kind of the Bachelor of Fine Arts kind of framework, right? If you're going to study art or theater or music or something like that, when you've got those dual enrollment credits, I think that the conversation I've had with a lot of students is really about whether or not those dual enrollment credits are going to sort of be able to count in a way that would allow that student to graduate early. And unfortunately, I think that the thing that's really specific to understand about the Bachelor of Fine Arts programs is that they're built as 4-year programs. And so even if all of your credits do transfer in, what you're doing is transferring in potential for electives, not transferring in time away, right? So you're not necessarily going to graduate in 3.5 years in a lot of these scenarios. It'll still be 4 years. It's really about whether or not you want to take that course on the college campus, or if you want to take, an underwater basket weaving class or something like that on the college campus. So think about it in that way as well.
Good. And Dan, any thoughts?
Yeah. So for I really can speak to my institution, and the point about the transfer equivalent sheet, like that's a great thing. Some institutions, like the one I represent, Olin College, when we're evaluating the student, we are looking at the ACE and the dual enrollment the same as an AP, so we're recognizing that it is more challenging. However, we do not award any college credit for any AP, IB, anything like that. And that is simply back to that transfer equivalency, is the courses at Olin are unique. So there isn't, if you take AP Psych, there is no equivalent to college psychology or college writing at Olin. So that's the reason why. So if you ask that question to another college rep and they say, no, we don't accept it, it's not because they're like, well, we want you to take everything here and we're just going to be mean about it. Most of the time, and if not all the time, it's because there is no course at their institution that is equal to you taking college writing at your local state college.
Excellent, thank you. Well, I want to move on to grades and GPA, which I know we've actually pretty much covered while talking about academics. And then one thing, and actually I do have one question in the chat, but before I go to that one, for students that may have had a grade slip, just for whatever reason, of course, we're going to talk a little, we also have a question about the COVID essay as well too coming up, but where could students, or where's the best place for students to share the reason for a grade slip in their application? What is the best, is it best for students to share that either in an essay or in another part? Is it better for a teacher or a counselor in a letter of recommendation? If a school doesn't take a letter of recommendation, how can students share that if they want to explain what happened if there was a grade slip?
So I can say that if I see an outlier semester, right, like if I'm looking at your transcript and I see that there's one semester where your GPA has been, is clearly lower than other semesters, the first 3 places I'm going to look are the additional information section, I'm going to look at your essay, and then I'm going to look at your counselor's recommendation. Because typically I don't expect it to be in a letter of rec from a teacher. If it is, that's great. But it usually is the counselor report that I would look at for that to see if the counselor has been able to speak to that directly. But yeah, so that what I would say is if it isn't in one of those other places, if you don't have a counselor that writes out that report for you, make sure that you're disclosing that in that additional information section. Because that is where we would move into the holistic side of our review process and take factors like that into account, especially if it was COVID related or if it was, a family emergency, something, personal happened that really impacted your ability to perform, that it will be a factor we would bring into the equation.
Great, and so for just students who want to know, the additional information section is found on the writing page of the Common app, and there's something similar on the Coalition app as well too, because Marilyn, you're Coalition exclusive, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. So good. So this sounds like a good place. And let me just look at the question that I've got in the chat. This is a great question. I'll generalize this a little. So when students are applying and submitting grades, and all of you I think mentioned this, that you recalculate the grades, and this student wants to know if you factor in all transcripts for GPA recalculation or only the primary school you attended. It sounds like the student transferred schools and then took a summer class. So for students that have transcripts coming from multiple schools, so should they send all the individual transcripts to you? What's the best way for students to handle that? or does it?
They should just have the transcript submitted through whatever process the school is offering. They might have to reach out to the previous schools to be able to have those other transcripts submitted. In some cases, the old transcripts are already put on the current transcript, and it just states some will just say out of state school if it's somewhere outside of the state or the district. Others will actually put the name. But yeah, we're going to ask for all of your high school transcripts. Some would even ask for any transcripts that have high school credit on them, and then any college coursework that you've taken, whether it is a summer program, if it is an online course that you've been able to take advantage of. Want to see all of it to be able to make a decision on who you are. And then with the transcripts and how we're reviewing, we're going to review you based on what's offered at your school each year. So say if you're at a different school for the first 2 years, I'll then go look up the profiles, blanking on the word for a second. I'll look up the profile from that school to see what was offered there and compared to how or what course selection you had there, and then look at your current school and their profile to see what you're being able to take advantage of. In some cases, you may have transferred later than the opportunity to be able to sign up for some of those more rigorous courses. If that's the case, be sure that your counselor shares that, or you share that as well, that could be the reason why you're not in the higher level courses that you wish you would have been able to be in.
Thank you. Well, let me move on to testing. And I know this year is a little different year as far as testing goes, with many schools going test optional or even test blind. But just in general, and this was one of the questions that came up in last week's presentation. For a student who is choosing to send test scores in, what is the best decision, or what do you recommend? Do you like to see all tests? Do you like to see the best tests? And I know the policy can vary from school to school. And do colleges also prefer one test over another? Sometimes students might believe that, oh, this school would like to see an SAT instead of an ACT, or vice versa. So what's your, for the schools that are looking at testing or considering testing, how would you advise students as far as making these decisions, as far as what tests to take and which even?
I guess I can go. So Michigan State for this year did go test optional for the incoming class that'll be applying here in the next couple months. With that said, we still expect a majority of our students will be applying with a test score, because research shows the schools that have gone test optional before this, typically less than 20% or so of their applicants come from a true test optional. So I think a good framework would be, if you're applying to schools, go out and look at what their middle 50% are. If your test scores kind of fall within that middle 50%, then it probably is in your best interest to submit that test score to that school. If you're maybe a little bit lower and you want to be able to explain that and have your application more thoroughly looked at for your other attributes, then maybe you would consider applying test optional. Some schools will not allow your test score to hurt your admission, even if it is lower, and that's my hope for how we're going to be reviewing at our school this year. But that's not necessarily the case. We don't, most schools I don't think have a really care between ACT or SAT. We have a lot of comparison charts, so we know what an ACT score is equivalent to on the SAT. What I will say is, and the answer is going to be different for every school as well, about how many times you take it, or if they want to see all those scores. A lot of schools super score your ACT or SAT, so it is in your best interest to submit multiple tests, because your sub scores could be different on each of those tests and you could get a higher super score. For MSU, we don't currently super score, but we would never disadvantage a student who submits multiple tests. I actually prefer to see multiple tests. Unless you got a perfect score the first time, why wouldn't you try again? That's kind of our view.
Good, thank you. Anyone else thoughts on testing or?
Yeah, the thing I would add in is I would just say, when we look at an applicant, we've been score optional for 14 years now, so we are no strangers to this game. When we look at an applicant, we're looking at their full academic history, right? And so we are going, as the admissions counselor that reviews your application, are going to finalize it as how it's going to look best, right? And so if you have submitted scores and they were not the best scores in the world, our counselors will actually switch you over to score optional, especially if it's going to make you eligible for a higher scholarship dollar or things like that. That's another piece where I said where it's like, reach out to that counselor. If you have a school you're interested, find the counselor that's assigned to your area, because every school is going to have a different philosophy on it. And I know that our philosophy, is different, especially for the folks that are, kind of new to the score optional game, and still navigating that. So what I would say is, yes, include everything. Show us everything, and trust that the folks on the other side, as a reader, I want to admit as many students as I can. I hate hitting the deny button. And so I'm going to be looking at, everything that you've provided me, and make choices that are in your best interest when evaluating your application.
Great, thank you. So I want to move on then to activities. So we've talked a lot about kind of the more like data-driven portion of the application, but we get a lot of questions, and students have questions about activities in that section, the activities, a resume. And so one of the questions that's come up is it better when you're looking at the activities, you're looking at a student's activities, is it better to be well-rounded, or I guess for lack of a better term, well-focused? So picking a couple different activities to focus on. What are your thoughts? And again, going back to our theme of like strengthening a college application, what can help a student as far as their activities go? Anyone?
I can say the one thing that stands out for us, like if you think about like the generic high school activities, right? High school sports, band and music, dance, some kind of hobby, passion activity that would be an extracurricular activity. At the end of the day, those 6 of one, half dozen of another to us. We'd like to see that you've been engaged in something that you're passionate about. And for us, I think one thing that it would weigh a little heavier as a factor is that we want to see that you've had an impact on your local community. And so whether that is through your school, whether that is through a church group that you're involved with, whether that is, you've gotten involved in local politics at your level, for us, when we look at that, that is the one I would say X factor compared to just a traditional, extracurricular activity. But, I think every school is going to have a different interpretation. You're going to hear that for pretty much everything today. But I would say things too, like if you've been a babysitter or you've had a part-time job at McDonald's because you have to, support your family through, your high school, you're trying to save money for college. Don't undersell yourself with anything you've done outside of your academic career. Own it and own everything that you've been a part of. But yes, so don't put too much worry on the semantics of the activity you've been involved with, just that it's something that you're passionate about and that you enjoy being a part of.
I would say that's exactly right. So, don't sell yourself short. Exactly what Jeff said. Your application is you're building a resume. So you want to include everything that's important. You're building a picture of who you are, so that way we can make an informed decision on whether or not we think you would be a good fit for our academic communities on our college campuses. So if there's something that's important that you're involved in, articulate that on your application. Otherwise, we don't know. And if you don't list activities and the things that you're involved in, or like Jeff said, if you have to have a job or babysit because you've got your siblings and you're not able to be on the football team or all these other activities, let us know that. That's still a valuable activity that you've been doing that is accounting for your time outside of the classroom. Activities is really letting us know how you utilize your time and are you a well-rounded person, and that's what we're looking for.
And actually, I was going to ask also for Marlon and Dan as well too, since your schools have a pretty narrow focus. So like, is it better? So like, if I'm a student and let's say I've been kind of doing football, band, whatever, but now I'm deciding I want to go into arts or into engineering. Like, what can students that might have a specific major or even program in mind do as far as using those activities to help strengthen their application? What would you two recommend? I know different programs, but
yeah, so I'll kind of jump in first and say that folks who are thinking about themselves as either visual or performing artists, yeah, we want to absolutely see that you are spending time and energy and effort working on your craft in some way. But I think that there's not a huge amount of pressure to prove that to us in the application process, because you're proving that to us in the audition process, so in the portfolio process. So I really want to like encourage folks in this space in particular to let us know who you are outside of your art making. I think that there are so many applications that I read specifically for, you know, vocalists or musicians that are only about vocals or, you know, or visual art. And so I think it's going to be really important to let us know, hey, you know what, by the way, I also was in like the Cute Kittens Club, and we just like shared pictures of cats all the time. And I am a full human being outside of my art in some ways. And so that's really important. In the activities section, I actually look for that. If I don't see it in some spaces, I ask about it if I do have an interview with the student.
Oh, nice. And Dan?
Yeah, I would kind of echo that, the piece of like who you are as who you are as a person. And again, so Marlon represents more of the art side, and I'm more of the engineering side, really. And you know, one of the things that I like to see when I'm reviewing an application is that a student actually has they're involved in things outside of just engineering. They're outside of FIRST Robotics or, you know, hackathon clubs and stuff like that, that they are, you know, they're musicians. And I think a lot of times it can depend on the culture of that particular institution, of that school. For instance, at Olin, the culture is that people are really involved in stuff outside of engineering. Like, everybody's there for a reason. They're all there for the same reason, to grow as engineers, but they are, you know, they're athletes, they're runners, they're involved in sailing and social justice and bookmaking. I mean, there's so much more, and we want to be able to see that from your application. And also, I mean, again, kind of echoing what Marlon said, we're looking at who you are as a person, and as long as we see that, you know, one of the things that I'm looking for in the overall application is why engineering. Like, do you want to be an engineer? A lot of times I'll get an application of somebody who applies because their mom wanted them to, or they you know, they're really interested in the way Olin teaches, but they're not, you know, they're not showing me anything that they actually want to do engineering, right? Because that's what we do. So even though you have other activities, and those other activities can even support that in ways that are not as evident. So I think that's a major thing. Is we're trying to get who you are as a person, but also make sure that your intentions of studying at that, if not at that particular school, in that particular field, are known.
Great, thank you. And I just got a question in the chat. This is a great, excellent question. I'm sure other students have similar ones. So this student writes, I have a lot more than 10 activities. How do I choose which activities to list? And should I submit a resume of additional activities? So what do we do how can we help the student out with this question? What would be the best way to handle this?
If you have more and you have the opportunity to share more, do so. What you're going to want to do on the ones that are on an application, share the ones that are most important to you, not necessarily the ones that you think are most important to us. Because by us seeing what's important to you, we're going to be able to, again, like everybody shared, see who you are as an individual. So that's going to be my one tip for you all with the activities and how to share the additional ones you're involved in.
Good. Anyone else? Marlon?
Olander basically said exactly what I was going to say. That's it.
That's a good one. And actually, just quick thumbs up response. Do any of you allow for students to submit a resume either through your application? So we got resumes. Yeah. Oh, great. So yeah. So another option as well too for our student is, yeah, in addition to, yeah, what are the activities that matter most to you, and you also have the opportunity to share a resume. Thank you for that question. Moving on to essays, which I know is always fun. And then I think that the questions that come up, well, there's a lot of questions that come up with the essays, and we've got one in the box here I'll ask in just a moment. But as far as essay goes, when you're reading the essays, do you prefer one topic over the other? Or kind of going back to our activities questions, like how do students choose the best topic for their essay when they're faced with those, whatever, 7 choices on Common App, 5 on Coalition, maybe there's a few supplemental. What advice would you give students when they're coming down to writing their college essays? As far as what makes good ones, or ones that are good to read, interesting to read, or any advice for students?
So one of my first pieces of advice is to not overload the reader with context. I think that sometimes you have a tendency to add a lot of extraneous details into essays. We all do, because we don't know that who the other person on the other side is. So I would say trust in the fact that the person on the other, that's going to be reading your application, trust that they have a brain is probably the best way that I have to explain it. That they can kind of interpret and pick up what you're putting down. I have so many essays that just go in and they go off on tangents, and it ends up taking like a fifth of the essay out because they've started to give us details about why, the soccer team at their high school is so important. When I don't really care about how important the soccer team is, I care about its impact on you and how it helped you to become a better leader, and what lessons you took away from being a part of the soccer team, and what values that instilled in you, and how you would plan to bring that into your future educational career and things like that. So I would say don't add unnecessary details is one of the biggest pieces of advice I can give.
And I would just say that it's important to remember, to be yourself and use your voice. And what you write about, I would venture to say for nearly every college, does not matter what you write about. So that shouldn't be what your concern is. The how and why piece of your essay, the critical thinking, the reflection piece of your essay is what's important. So your essay is a chance for you to explain the world as you see it. Why is something important to you? How has something impacted your life? How has being part of this activity made you a better person or helped your community? Those are the types of things we're trying to understand, that you can critically think and reflect. Those are 2 of the hardest things you're going to learn in college, whether you're in a liberal arts program or in an engineering program. You have to be able to write, and you have to be able to make meaning of the world around you and use self-reflection. And that's what your essay going into college is kind of a window for us to see if you have those abilities already.
Really take it as your time to shine. Think of it as, if it's a school that doesn't offer any interviews, think of it as your personal interview just on paper. Also, your essay, especially if you're a rising senior, is really the last piece of information that you'll share with us that you still have control over. Unless you're going to apply to a school that might have a little bit later deadline where you can submit your first quarter or first semester grades, everything else is set in stone. The tests that you take, you might have an opportunity in the fall to do so, but your grades freshman through junior year has ended. And so that's why the essay can be an important piece where you're able to share and able to really give light on areas that we might have questions about, or just to share a little bit more about you, to see that, hey, let's say this is who I am and how I'll fit with your community.
Wonderful. And can a strong essay help other areas of the application that might not be quite as strong? And conversely, can a poorly written essay not weaken the application?
Absolutely. I've definitely seen it go both ways, where a strong essays really tied a whole application together, maybe mentioning what's going on with their grades, what was going on in their personal lives, and what their goals are, in a way that kind of fills in the blanks and gives me a full picture of what the student's up to. And then there are those essays with, a lot of silly errors, not switching out the name of the university, for example, in your essay, lots of spelling and grammar errors and that sort of thing. But there's also something I see a lot with essays where folks are really interested in sort of letting us know how passionate they are about a certain topic, potentially their major. I'm really passionate about being a fashion designer. I'm really passionate about, majoring in this other thing. And I want to sort of reframe that, because I think that none of us are interested in how much you care about the subject, but all of us are interested in what your take on the subject is, right? And so if you're applying to, a particular major, we assume that you care about that and you will work hard toward that, you're passionate about it. But we really want to know what you think about that major. And so if you find yourself in your writing toward your college essay kind of being like, I love this and I've always loved this and this is my favorite thing, take a step back and realize and think about what are you actually thinking about that thing? What is your take on it, and how are you going to contribute to that idea?
I've seen the make or break aspect also influence the additional things your application could be considered for. So say like an honors or special program, living learning community, scholarships, and even in some cases, direct entry into a major. So even though you might have jumped the hurdle with your essay in the admissions review, also take into consideration there might be other people that'll have their eyes on that application, how it could affect those special opportunities you could be invited to.
Yeah, I'll share just like a quick tidbit story here. So for our honors college, one of the essay prompts is, what is the most compelling thing you've ever read and why? And I cannot tell you how many Catcher in the Rye or 1984 I get every year. I mean, I would say it's at least 100 of both. And the best essay I ever read was about a Kim Kardashian tweet. And it was like, how is that, relevant into the academic world and society? And it basically was the student talking about how it put them into this existential crisis, and it made them question all these things. And it was so unique that to this day, I still know that student. I remember reading the essay because I think similar to what Olander said is that and I think Richard too, where they have a point of view and we're seeing that point of view. And we want to see you stake a claim on something, not just like tell us, and I think to Marlon, not just tell us how passionate you are, but like show us your perspective on it. And it was not necessarily the core of the prompt, but it was the way that they interpret it that really left a lasting impression.
Right, a great example. I love that example. Let me see here. Oh, and then I've just got a question from the chat box. If a student, so just thinking about the new COVID-19 short response that's appearing both on a Common App and Coalition app, if a student, so the student wants to know if a student wasn't impacted from COVID, is it okay to answer that essay with how they spent their time, or better to leave blank? What are your recommendations?
I think it may it's what we're going through is so new. I think it's a great question that I mean, I personally I don't think that we can answer, or I know that I can't answer, because I think it's I think best just to be honest. And part of that saying, I was not affected, I think is, a lot of us who we were already working remotely as regionals, so we weren't as impacted as people that were going to work every day and our colleagues on campus. So I think that it's just I think the thing you can always rely on is be honest. And it impacted me this way, or it didn't impact me, and then maybe a sentence or two saying what you did with your time and what you hoped to be able to learn out of it.
I think it's just also important to remember we're putting, like, Common App and a lot of the applications have added that in order to deter you from writing your actual essay about how you responded to the pandemic. So if you don't have anything valuable to add, like, we're just trying to make sure not every one of our essays that we're reading is about the coronavirus and how people have responded to that. But I don't think anybody's going to be upset about you telling us how you utilized that time and how you had to learn differently during those last 2 months of your school year and how you adapted. I think that did impact you. I think everybody's been impacted, whether your family was financially or impacted. Everybody's got a different way of life now, and your take on that's going to be interesting to us.
And I think that's the key, is telling your story behind it, not necessarily explaining mid-March school shut down and just leaving it at that. We're going to assume that happened, but also I'm sure we'll have that information, that counselor recommendation. So having your take on things and how, if it was a challenge for you at first, but what study habits or what did you learn about yourself as an individual, that could be something that would be useful in there. Or as was mentioned, as Dan even said, for some individuals, it didn't affect as much. And so if you're able to share that, but also share something about yourself, that's something that we're going to want to see.
Great. No, thank you. Wonderful advice. And I know we're coming to the top of the hour, so I want to start wrapping things up. And I know we did already actually talk about the majors and kind of some of the different things to look at for some of those specific majors, and also some of the other factors as well. I think we've included as part of this conversation. So as we wrap up tonight's conversation, is one final question for the panel is, as we move into the application cycle, as we're moving into this next application cycle, what advice can you share with rising seniors and their families as they get started with applications? And I'll go in reverse order, so I'll start with Dan. What advice would you give seniors?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is, even though it's a stressful time, but also kind of take the time to enjoy this. I mean, this process is going to be stressful, and I think understand that going in, that there's going to be times where you get frustrated. There's going to be times when you knew that you shouldn't procrastinate on that essay, and you have to turn in the application for that scholarship or for into the institution. So kind of be upfront with understanding that it's going to be stressful, but also this can be a very exciting time, especially as parents, if this is your first child going away or it's your last child going away. I think that there's a lot to really enjoy about this process, and just kind of embrace where you are right now and enjoy that, and understand that there's going to be challenges, but I think understanding that up front will enable you to really and get the most out of this process for sure.
Thanks, Dan. Marlon?
So I think that my big piece of advice is, especially when you're kind of thinking about where to apply or what school might be the right fit for you, is to kind of think less about where you want to learn and think about more about how you want to learn, how you want to receive information, how you want to be, set up in a classroom, how, best do you sort of get projects done? Is that collaboratively? Is that by yourself? Whatever that is, I think that how is going to be really sort of the driving factor for you in making the best decisions for yourself in terms of where to apply, and then the subsequent decisions after that. So, yeah.
Great. No, thank you. Orlando?
I think read your email, sign up for our mailing list, follow us on social media, because things are changing. Slow down a little bit. It used to be on the hour. Now I think it's every 24 hours. Slow down a little bit with the changes, but still there are things that are going to change over the next few weeks, next few months, policies. So read those emails, check out those social media posts, because they're going to be information that you're not going to want to miss. So that's my tip for the updates. I did also want to share, reach out to us. We're all connected here because we're available for you all. FRAC as an organization, you will have that survey you can fill out where you'd like to get in touch with one of us or some of us that weren't on it tonight. We're here for you. We want to reach out. We want to help you along with the process. We are available via email, phone call, however we share information, but take advantage of the resources that are out there.
Thank you. Richard?
Yeah, I'm just going to echo some of the things we've already said. Once you get to the point where you're applying to, a select number of schools that you've determined are places you are interested in, don't sell yourself short. If there's something that is important about you, let us know. Otherwise, we're not going to know. Every college is different. Some colleges are getting thousands and thousands and thousands of applications, and it's really hard to spend a lot of time reading those applications. So put those important things up front. Let us know so we have that information. Once you get to the point of applying, don't overthink everything. This generation, you guys are so hesitant to hit that submit button. Write your essays, fill everything in, have another set of eyes look at it, proofreading, and then submit it and forget about it. You can't overstress and overthink about this too much. And then, as Olander said, utilize your resources. You've got us as resources, you've got college counselors in your high schools, and your friends are resources. So, you're all going through this at the same time. All of your friends that are rising seniors, you're all applying to colleges. Pool your resources, talk about what the process is like, the timelines, and utilize each other.
Great. And then Jeff?
I would echo, what I've heard from my colleagues. The other piece that I would add is that remember that the college process is a match to be made and not a prize to be won. And I think that there is often such a desire to compare yourself to others. Oh, can I get in there? Am I good enough? And that's really not what it is. I think at the end of the day, you're able to see hundreds of universities across the United States simultaneously coexist because they provide different experiences to different students. And it's all about finding where is that environment where you feel like you can thrive and where you can be successful, and it checks every single one of your boxes confidently. And I think also know that the admissions counselor on the other side cares about fit just as much as you do. Our goal is not to get you in the door and sell you a false product and have you hate it after a semester. We really want to make sure that if you are choosing to attend an institution, especially if you're choosing to go an institution out of state, that you really have done your research thoroughly and you're confident in your decision, because we don't want to just get you there. We want to get you graduated from there, hopefully in 4 years or less.
Great. Well, thank you all so much. Let me just put up our upcoming session. So thanks again to our panelists for sharing such wonderful advice and insight. And again, that inquiry form will go out as part of a link in the webinar recording that we'll send out. And then certainly if you miss it or if you don't see it, you're always welcome to email me. It's Hart, H-A-R-T, at scoreatt.com, and I'll be happy to get that out to you. Just quickly, we have 2 more sessions with FRAC. Next week, we're going to be a taste of the 10 with some of our Big Ten schools, talking about life and learning at Big Ten schools and athletics. And then we'll round out the series last Wednesday in July with lucrative lasting learning and talking about the liberal arts. And then when you sign up for one webinar, you're signed up for all. But if you're watching this recording and would like to join us live, you can sign up at scorewebinar.com, and we'll also post a detailed description as well as some of the presenters that'll be making an appearance. So once more, I just want to thank again my awesome panelists. Thank you all so much. Thanks to the audience for providing such great questions. Everyone have a safe and healthy week, and I'll see you guys. I'll be back next Wednesday at 5. Thank you all. Good night.